Sunday Baroque Conversations is made possible by the Friends of Sunday Baroque and is produced at WSHU Public Radio in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm Suzanne Bona. Thanks for listening. Don't miss an episode of Sunday Baroque Conversations. Subscribe on Apple, Google, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review. If you want to find out where you can listen to our weekly show, visit our website, sundaybaroque.org, for a station list and our 24/7 stream. Again, that's sundaybaroque.org. Patricia Ann Neely is a professional musician who plays viola da gamba and other bowed string instruments and has made numerous recordings and performed with top early music ensembles across the globe. She's been on the board of Early Music America and the Viola da Gamba Society of America. She's chaired both organizations' equity, diversity, inclusion, and access committees. She's also an educator and an advocate for musicians, especially in the field of early music. Since late 2019, Pat and I have had a series of conversations about the early music world and efforts to address diversity and systemic inequities. Today, we are convening again to continue our discussion. Hi, Pat.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Just fine, and very happy to be back.
It's good. It's good to be able to speak with you, and I look forward to the time that we can actually be in the same studio again. So thanks for speaking on Zoom with me today. February is Black History Month, and this is an observance that was officially recognized in 1976 by U.S. President Gerald Ford, although the roots of the celebration go back to the very early years of the 20th century. I thought we could talk about Black History Month and its place in the year 2022, its relevance, its importance, and maybe what we aspire to accomplish with that, and in your opinion, how people can make the most of that. So maybe if we could start, could you just give an overview of Black History Month and how it began, how it's evolved?
Sure. Way back at the turn of the century, in the era of post-Reconstruction, African Americans were actually doing quite well if they had the opportunities. And in 1915, there was an interest in celebrating that and keeping the history of the community alive by Carter G. Woodson. And what he did is he founded an Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which was an organization dedicated to researching and promoting achievements by Black Americans and others of African descent. Out of that came a week celebration in February called Black History Week, which occurred the second week of February in honor of the birthday of Lincoln on February 12th, and the assigned date or birth date of Frederick Douglass, which is celebrated on the 14th of February. And this was extended in 1976 after the civil rights movement had its heyday. In fact, there was so much activity in the 60s that Gerald Ford in 1976 decided it should be a month-long celebration, and that's how it got started. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that when I was growing up in a certain decade, I was aware that we read about the African American community constantly, and part of that was because it was the civil rights movement. And also the publications that were associated with Black culture and Black communities were very much involved in disseminating the information, such as Ebony magazine, Jet magazine, and a publication called The Crisis, which is still published by the NAACP. So with that said, every day was a day in my life to appreciate and celebrate Black lives. But the month of February is one that everyone that is a public a way of remembering and celebrating those accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. So I know that that organization that you mentioned, that Carter G. Woodson established, the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, that's now, I think, been renamed the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And Dr. W. Marvin Dulaney is currently the president of that organization. He was interviewed pretty recently, and he said that his hope for the future is that one day he'll be out of a job. But he's not out of a job right now. So this is a relevant issue. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about whether you think it is still important to celebrate Black History Month. I know you had a little exchange with a colleague not too long ago about that idea, and you don't have to reveal who that was, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. Like, what are the thoughts about whether we should, and if so, how should we celebrate Black History Month?
Yeah, I mean, my first impression was the fact that he didn't designate who was saying it, but from the community that he lives in Atlanta. Communities in Atlanta are much more connected to the American society, which is successful middle class, successful upper class. Mm-hmm. And we have been striving for equality and equity in everything we do. And their communities there are achieving that aspect. And why go back and think about what happened in the past when they are making history right now in the present?
Sure.
The other thought I had was that the youngest generation now of potential leaders are talking about what's happening now. They are complaining about the way the white community is patronizing the Black community. And in some cases, they may think that this is the opportunity during the month for that to happen, that people are not exactly generous. But my feeling is, if there are complaints and if there are protests during the year, perhaps February is the time to start thinking about ways to solve that issue, because there hasn't been any inclination that the protests are providing an impetus for people to talk and come up with a solution. Mm-hmm. Black History Month allows for us all to get together, no matter what our opinions are about the way things are being handled with this issue, but to celebrate the successes of people who came before, who were struggling to achieve just what we're trying to achieve again. And that speaks to my mantra that the civil rights movement in the 60s failed because we did not continue to do that. We did not continue to manage it, even though in 76, we have the opportunity to spend an entire month in celebration. And of course, on Martin Luther King's birthday, a month before. So I think we just have to think carefully about how we determine the meaning of this. It's always going to be in a state of flux. We should use that as our impetus for solving those issues that come up that are affecting the community at large.
Mm-hmm. And this is so interesting because, this is, as I said, we've had a number of conversations so far. It's kind of an ongoing series. And that is really the connective thread that you have repeated all along, which is that, talking, having a dialogue, problem solving directly, and not making assumptions, but really rolling up one's sleeves and engaging is really the key to resolving these issues. So I like that you've, sort of put the same, looked at it through the same lens. But I also like, something you mentioned before we turned on the microphones was that this is a real opportunity for celebration, because celebration is also important.
Yeah, it's the celebration makes you think about just how much we have achieved. Mm-hmm. To learn that there were activists back in the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are activists now at the turn of the middle of the 21st century. 100 years ago, we could have had that dialogue and it would still be relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you the strength, it lends us the strength to keep moving. It
Mm-hmm.
isn't as if we're starting and recreating the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
We can quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, we can quote from Moore, we can quote from a number of people who had a vision that may not exactly align with what we're doing today, but certainly can give us the background and the basis for moving ahead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you have any thoughts about like what, I don't know, what the average person might do to make Black History Month observance more meaningful, more action oriented, maybe?
I think, me being a music historian, I'm always looking at the past.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I want this next generation to see the connection through the decades of activism on the part of the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
So that can only come if we're all aware that it's happening. I don't mean just African Americans, everyone in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this month does. It draws everyone in to the conversation. It educates everyone. And to do that for just a month, I would love to have that happen consistently. But if this is what we have, this is our tool, this is our moment to really get the point across. And it doesn't mean that we have to rely on history. We can still make history by then juxtaposing our own views today with those of the past, and how the percentage of what we've achieved can be analyzed as an outcome of the celebration.
Yeah. So, not too many years ago, I heard a story, and it was probably on NPR, since I pretty much got that on all the time. And it was a discussion of Black History Month, and I'll just never forget this. It's a real lump in the throat kind of moment, because it was a little boy who was being interviewed or being quoted, and they were saying, well, do you know about Black History Month, and why is it in February? And this little guy said, well, I just thought it's because it's the shortest month. And, if there are still people who think that, if there's still, I mean, this is a little kid, to me, that alone is the proof that we still need to have this, and we still need to focus on this, because no little guy should ever feel that way,
Well, it also is revealing. It's revealing that we're all still hurting.
Yep.
The way to turn that into something positive is to say, at least we have a month.
Yeah.
And what we can do in that month is it can expand every year. I mean, there is this year of wellness, and that really does coincide with what we've been going through for the past 2 years.
Yeah. But
there can be multiple themes. Right. And maybe one of them should be, why are kids thinking that this isn't that important because they gave us the shorter month? That's a topic in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
And it's also, during the month, I remember my daughter's school, Ruby Bridges paid a visit to her school during Black History Month when she was younger. And she came home and told me, and she says, it's really great. I'm only a little bit Black. And I thought, okay, that's not what I want to hear.
Oh, boy.
And that is because she heard a story about a girl her age having a problem, trying to get to school and being taught for one whole year in a classroom by herself, by the only teacher who would teach her. And here is my daughter in a school with 60 other girls in her class, and she's not experiencing that. And she's thinking, not that something has happened, that Ruby Bridges brought that to the attention of the world. It's that it's not happening to me.
Right. So okay, so you're the boss of the world. What would you like to see Black History Month be like? What would you like in a perfect world? What would Pat Neely make for Black History Month?
I think it's one of those projects I've had in the back of my mind to educate. A few years ago, when I gave a paper at the Indiana University Conference on the history of the civil rights movement, I learned a great deal just doing. I mean, I was involved in the civil rights movement by just being around, being alive.
Right.
I didn't know all of the background of the civil rights movement and the personal connection that we all have to this. That you had whites and blacks working together to affect change. And I think we have to have, I would love to see a huge symposium where those people like Harry Belafonte and those people who are still alive can address what it was that was their catalyst for making this movement important. And that will help those who are going to lead after us to consider a strategy to get the work done. Right now, as I said before, there's no explanation as to why we're continuing to complain and shame people without having after that a possible solution to discuss. We should all be on that conversation.
So speaking of solutions, I mean, you've been on the front lines of this matter, including trying to find solutions as it applies to the early music world and some of the contemporary performers and their experiences. Do you have any updates, anything you want to share, any maybe great successes that we can celebrate?
Well, I'll say, personally speaking, it has really helped me develop more self-esteem because I know that I have a voice now that's going to be heard, and I don't have to suppress it because, as my parents said, you're going to encounter this. Just feel sorry for those people. Well, it's not feeling sorry for anyone. It's making sure that you understand that we're all on equal ground. And that's what the past 2 years has done for me. And I think it's one of those situations where transparency has to be developed on all fronts, that we should not be afraid. I mean, if one group is shaming another, that's not positive. That's not a positive outcome. That's just more intimidation, and then more of a chance that all of this is going to be suppressed somehow, including how people feel about each other. But if we meet on an even playing field and we are both articulate about what we need, what has happened and what we need to have happen, I think that's the answer to the question for me. Where do we go from here?
Well, Pat, you always have such good wisdom and an honest perspective, and I appreciate your willingness to speak and to keep this dialogue going. I've been speaking with Patricia Ann Neely on Zoom. She is a professional musician whose areas of expertise include various historical bowed string instruments, as well as educating and advocating for musicians in the field of early music. Pat, thank you so much.
Thank you.